Well, the latest from Zimbabwe is that President Emmerson Mnangagwa has extended that country's presidential elections by another day. Some commentators, including the journalist Hopewell Chinue, says that yesterday's election turned out to be the worst election in Zimbabwe's post-colonial history, according to Hopewell. He says that there have been reports of ruling party officials demanding names and ID numbers of voters, especially in rural areas, that polling stations didn't have enough ballot papers or they didn't arrive at all, and that in many parts people's names weren't on what is already a contentious voters' roll. Joining me now, Zenzele Ndebele, a journalist in Bulawayo. Zenzele, really appreciate your time and thanks so much for joining us. Elections extended. With everything that has reportedly gone wrong, how can we trust and how can people of Zimbabwe trust that this election will actually be declared free and fair? Good morning.
Morning to you. Yeah, the issue of the extension of the election days is actually interesting because it started off with a fake news story that the elections have been extended. Then there was what we call the statutory instrument from government extending voting in some wards. So it's not really everywhere where elections have been extended, because in other areas polls closed last night and vote counting is underway. But there are areas where ballot papers delayed, and these areas, that's where the polling station, the voting was extended. So it's in certain wards in Manicaland, it is in certain wards in Harare, and definitely not in the rest of the country as it was earlier on reported. It has been, to put it nicely, it has been a chaotic election, because I'm trying to look for a West word that I can use. Just on the 18th of August, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission released a statement that everything was going fine. They even told us the number of ballot papers that they had printed for the presidential, the parliamentary, and the local election. But yesterday, when voting was supposed to start at 7, most polling stations in Bulawayo and Harare did not have ballot papers. They had to wait for until 1 p.m. Some polling stations opened at 3 a.m. That meant that at 3 p.m. So that meant that the polling stations would be open for 12 hours and close at 3 a.m. this morning. In other parts of the country, in rural areas mainly, where ZANU-PF has support, the election went on quite well, no incidents reported. So it became suspicious that why is it that there were voting glitches only in areas that are controlled by the opposition.
So does this mean that this chaotic election, as you describe it, does it mean that this poll is less than credible? What are election observers saying?
The election observers have not yet, issued statements, especially the international observers, but definitely there will be the issues of credibility, because you cannot have an election where people wake up as early as 6 a.m. to go vote, and when the ballot papers don't turn up until 3 p.m. A lot of people left without voting because the ballot papers were not there. So the chaos that preceded this election and on the election day will actually make it very difficult to describe this election as credible.
Nelson Chamisa, the man who's up against Emmerson Mnangagwa, campaigning hard over the last few weeks. We've been trying to get him on air to talk to him, and his spokespeople saying he's simply too busy campaigning, particularly in rural parts of Zimbabwe. While he's campaigning hard, he's equally said he does not necessarily believe that this election will be free and fair. Just your thoughts as an activist. Can you equally question the outcome of an election, saying it may not be free and fair, but at the same time go and contest in an election where you hope to get enough votes to reach the presidency?
The issue of Zimbabwean elections as well has been controversial in the fact that the opposition will complain about all sorts of things. They are playing level playing field, are not free and fair, but then go on and contest. And sometimes they lose the election, complain again, they go to courts, they don't get the cases, they complain again. So once one of the things that people have been talking about in Zimbabwe is the issue of electoral reforms. That why doesn't the opposition push for electoral reforms way before the elections? Make sure that there are laws that will make it easier. We know it's not going to be easy for ZANU-PF to give in to those, but at least there needs to be a lot of pressure, because right now we are headed for another contested election. Chamisa spoke yesterday at a press conference complaining about these issues and saying they are not going to allow these things to happen. So we are headed for another contested election, and Zimbabwe has always had contested election since 2000.
Zenzele Ndebele is a Bulawayo-based journalist, filmmaker, and human rights activist.